Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Hoven, your host of the Difference Makers podcast. This is a place where people come together that are making a difference for those who want to make a difference. And that's you. We're bringing thought leaders together in a sense of fusion where ideas and concepts and personalities are all driven together into one place at one time. And this is no different. In this episode, you're going to see cool things from cool people making a difference. Well, hello everyone. It's time for another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. And today, like every other day, I have a chance to interview someone amazing doing something special in the community. But this time, it's part of our series, our mental health series. So this person, if you've been following us for a while, if you've been hanging out, he's no stranger to who we are and what we do. This is Dr. Schwenkler, and he's been with us on 2 occasions now. And literally, it's been so good. We've gotten such amazing feedback from some of the pieces that have gone out over the internet world that we said, we're doing more. We're doing more. So Dr. Ramos was kind enough to come back to join us today, and we're going to talk about loss and specifically different types of loss, how we get through them, how we navigate them. And so without any further delay, Dr. Ron, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always great being here with y'all.
And just your energy just so connects with mine. Like when I see you, I just came out of a leadership meeting, right? I was with someone for an hour and we were working on this and that. And so I was looking forward to that leader, to making the most of that meeting and jumping right into this one. So cool. Because just the way that you go about your business is truly fascinating to me, of almost getting to someone's mind through their heart, if I were describing it. So just for the sake of a quick introduction, if people haven't seen some of our previous episodes or haven't heard them in podcasts, just give us a little bit about the type of therapy that you offer, what you do in your work, and how you get to the results you get. And then we'll jump into loss. You bet. Your
words are always so kind and encouraging. It's great. It's great being here. I think I've been in the mental health field for 28 years, and I spent a lot of time, I'm a trauma specialist. That's what I've been doing for the last about 12 years solely, is doing trauma work. And I think, we could look at what I do as somatic therapy, but more so than just, a singular theory, cognitive behavioral, somatic, whatnot. I really just focus so much on the true nature of trauma theory. And so,
can you define that, trauma theory?
Well, trauma theory is instead of working a specific technique, right? Like there's a lot of techniques out there, EMDR, somatic experiencing, and whatnot. Trauma theory is the overarching idea that in an adverse experience, it's the mind, brain, nervous system, and body are working to optimize someone's survival potential, but also can cause so many problems in their optimization, in their efforts to survive, in their efforts to keep going. And so understanding how all the different parts work together really allows to connect with their heart, but also with their behavior, because sometimes emotions can get in the way. Sometimes we get caught up in emotions. And understanding the theory, and really spending time on the nature of the human condition allows trauma therapists to connect with the person where they need to be connected, which isn't always where they want to be connected. Right?
Yeah, they'd like something different
to process, right? Because we don't want to get stuck in this stuff. I mean, life has a life of its own, and when traumas happen, when loss happens, life doesn't stop. And so we gotta. I focus a lot on working kind of like, we got to keep going. We got to heal on the go, because we don't get to take 2 months off. We don't get to take 1 week off. Some people that I work with can't even take a couple days off. Yes. Because the hustle is real, and everyone's grinding hard. And so it's always a dance about, how do we keep moving while slowing down to address the sensitivities around the traumas and loss and the complexities, the consequences that they create.
Yeah. And one of those things that, where we want to really hone in on today is this topic of loss. And when you talk about the consequences that are created, it made me think just briefly about when you lose something, there's a perceived consequence and a real consequence, and it might,
right.
and those two might not be anywhere close to each other,
yeah.
but they might overlap as well. So would you, as we start this portion on loss, would you define what loss is? Because I think it can be seen from two different perspectives, right? Again, what if I lose $1, if it falls out of my pocket, that's one kind of loss. If I lose something, if I lose a relationship, is that the same kind of loss as me losing the dollar? You know what I'm getting at? Like, Can you give us different perspectives or definitions?
That's so great. I was just thinking about that, this morning. It's like there are objects, we lose objects, right? But I think I lost something. But I think loss is when something is in our lives and we build confidence in it. There's familiarity to it. And then it for reasons of expected or unexpected, it goes away. That's loss. Right?
Does loss go on a gradient scale for us as human animals, do you think? Or like is the loss of because I've heard that, things like loss of a loved one, of like spouse, parent, a child, all of which I've kind of dealt with over the last couple of years,
right.
even within the last 2 months. That's one kind of loss of a job, loss, bankruptcy. Are those are they kind of hierarchical in that? Or is the sense of loss it's the same feeling, just magnitude based on what you quote unquote lose?
I think it's so personal. I mean, we would assume, right, as human mammals, right, as human animals, right, like the death of a loved one is the most severe loss. Mm-hmm. But yet I've worked with people that, for a variety of reasons that I think we'll get into about, kind of the resiliencies that have to do with loss. We can talk about that later, but they work with that, right? Because death is natural. And yet I've also worked with someone, obviously, who's just got into, complicated, complex grief. And I've worked with someone who's lost a job and it was worse than the person who lost a loved one. And so I think it's really personal. But I think the aspect that weaves itself between all those contexts is the familiarity piece, right? Like our nervous system likes familiarity. It likes consistent, even if it's bad, at least then it's predictable, right? Mm-hmm. And when something changes, our nervous systems don't like that. Like the deepest parts of us have a hard time with that. And that's the loss, I think, that we're talking about, whether it's a job, having to move, a betrayal, a death. That's it stirs us very, very deeply, And
it's interesting to me. Maybe you can expand on this a little bit. Identity. We all have our identities. We see ourselves as ourselves from a perspective of however we live. Like you and I see ourselves as people who love to care about people. We see ourselves as people that love to work out. We see ourselves as people that love to enjoy our life. There are people that see themselves, and we see that here in the law firm, especially with a lot of the pilots that we work with in our aviation division. Mm-hmm. These folks, if they can't fly a plane, their identity says they are not the same person. That degree of loss, because their identity is so tied to that thing, or to being a lawyer or to being a doctor, is identity locked in and linked into loss?
I think absolutely right. So I talk about how the nervous system has 4 big allergies. Death being the first one.
Allergies
right?
to the nervous system.
Allergies to the nervous system.
I like it.
And this is according to Ron. There's a lot of research, but it's just this group is what I see over and over again. So death is one of them. Randomness is another one. The nervous systems do not like randomness. We like familiarity, right? Helplessness and isolation, right? So we could see that loss, right? Especially an identity level loss, right? We have a aspect of sometimes randomness, right? Where we get caught or something bad happens and all of a sudden our license is in jeopardy. That can make us feel like we're going to die, right? A kind of existential death. Helplessness, like my job has just changed or my career has just changed. I can't do what I used to do. And that makes us feel very, very alone. And people can feel alone, surrounded by 100 different people,
right.
A dozen loved ones, and we can still feel alone when we're in loss or this kind of magnitude of heavy change. And so I think identity plays into it a lot, and it can also act as a resiliency, right? So, for instance, when we have a philosophy of life that has to do with understanding that change is part of life, Death is part of life. Grief happens because we love. Like if love wasn't there, then we wouldn't grieve.
Yes.
So we stay close to the love, that we can still commune with our ancestors and the dead, which our current culture around the world isn't so great at, but humanity was really good at it for thousands of years. We spent a lot of time, communing with the dead and our ancestors, right?
Honoring them through traditions and ceremonies and meditations and all these kinds of things.
Right, prayer. Yep. And so, when you have a philosophy of life that incorporates those things, that understands that change is part of the nature of life, then we can roll with things better.
I love that. It's interesting to me. I'm reading this book called Breakfast with Seneca, just finishing it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about the Stoic philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. And something that came not easily or naturally to me was to essentially premeditate loss. And that's what really got me on this topic. You and I were saying, hey, Jim, what do you think? What do you talk about, Ron? What do you think? And this loss was on my mind for a couple of reasons. One, I'm reading this book, and two, as you very well know, just went through the loss of my mother-in-law who lived with us and love her dearly. And so I'm reading this book, and it's talking about this. I've been reading it since before she passed away, and it's talking about if you premeditate or see the loss of anything, just know it's going to happen. So if you see it, it makes you have gratitude in the moment for the relationships or the thing, whatever, as they say, fate has blessed you with. Don't worry about losing it, because you're going to lose it all at the end of the day anyways. Right. So picture it being gone and then love the heck out of it while you have it.
Exactly.
Pretty interesting deal. And again, to me, I wanted to get the love part and not see the loss part.
Because I think loss magnifies. It helps define love. Right. And it helps us cherish it more when we have it. And it's not always perfect, but it's a lot better than when we don't have it. Yes. Especially if that person really matters to us. But I think the wise cultures around the world constantly push the community towards the contemplation of loss. I think Buddhists have a meditation regarding the stages of death after death, like what happens to the body through the decomposition process. And so even there, right, it's a heavy contemplative, meditative experience to consider change. That death is the big change, but our body even continues to change once the spirit, the soul has left. Right.
Dude,
so there's so many aspects, and I think it's good to study the wise traditions.
I do too, right? Because that's
a
really
good thing to do.
I think the future lies back in the past. There's ancient wisdom there that I think we can all benefit from, including in this topic of when we lose something. And like we were talking about a little bit earlier, I don't know if it is a graduated scale or of the feeling is different or it's just magnified in intensity, but there's even a feeling of there's an actual loss. Like, for example, you and I both work with people who have been in trauma, specifically personal injury situations, whether they've been in a car accident or even like some of the people, I'm sure you've seen this, we get clients who've been bit by a dog. Right now, I've actually been in this situation of being bit by a dog, and the loss that comes from trauma, even if you don't die, you don't lose a job, if something happens to you, there's a sense of loss. I know for our people, a lot of times they can't go to work for a while, if at all. They can't do the things that they love to do. They can't be intimate with their partner. They can't drive or without agitation. They can't sleep. And they view all of that as loss.
All of it is. Yeah.
And so when we're talking about that kind of loss versus a quote unquote permanent loss of a loved one, or you know, your home is gone or something, you lose it in a flood or bankruptcy. Talk to me about trauma that happens to us and that loss, and what do we do about it?
Yes, it's huge, right? It's very, very real. There's almost like two levels of, there's lots of levels, but you have the trauma, right? You have the experience that causes all the loss, right? So a lot of times we have these intrusive thoughts. You have all these things that go along with trauma, the loss of confidence. But then you have the spider web consequences that come from that, not being able to drive, not being able to talk, not being able to be intimate. There's all these things that happen, and it's loss, 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 right? What do we do with that is we have to hold hands with it, right? Like we have to step into the loss and work with it.
Can you describe what that looks like? Like, is it a thinking process? Is it an exercise?
I think, and this is where, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm a shrink. So, I mean, yes, do therapy, right?
Yeah.
So that's good, right?
Yeah.
And we don't always, people are like, well, I can talk to my loved ones. And it's like, when you talk to a loved one, and you may have experienced this, right? Mm-hmm. Someone says, how are you doing after a loss? And you tell them, and they'll say something like this, hang in there, it's going to get better.
Yes.
And you're like, don't say that to me. Like, that doesn't feel good, right? And so when someone tells that to me, we might do some resourcing. We might get them oriented with their breathing and some muscle kind of relaxation. And then I say, let's step into it. Let's really feel the loss and the emotions, the thoughts, even the memories that are connected to that loss. And we slow everything down. Right. And so we have to learn how, when we say hold hands with it, we're literally talking about slowing everything down, getting the body resourced in the moment, right, through breath, so they have a biological experience of safety in the moment, in the office, so they can grieve, so they can feel, so they can worry. And instead of just skipping over, like, hang in there.
Yeah.
That's, it's like, that doesn't feel good, right? It's very minimizing.
Yeah.
And I think people are saying that, one, because they love us. They want to say something that's going to help, mm-hmm. right? But also they're scared. Like, the idea of slowing everything down and stepping into someone's fear and loss and trauma, like, that doesn't feel good.
Right.
That's why the training is important. And so we kind of gloss over it and pat them on the back and say, it's going to be okay, right? And so it's, when people talk to loved ones about loss, it triggers their own thoughts and fears at least a pre-conscious, if not a conscious and unconscious level, about that loss too.
Yeah.
So we want to work with professionals. We want to work with people, spiritual leaders, all sorts of, people that have been trained to slow it down and explore it, because we got to accept it.
So help me with this then. When, like we've mentioned earlier, I've experienced more or less in the last 2-3 years than I have experienced in my whole life combined. At 56, from 53 to 56, has been like, I'm a lost pro, at least from experience. I don't know if I'm dealing with it as a pro, but I've experienced a lot from, my dad, our son 2 years, my dad 3 years ago, our son 2 years ago, my mom, my mother-in-law just a handful of weeks ago, and 4 dogs that are, I'm a dog guy, right? Bro. So all this has really happened in a long time. And I've noticed that, and this is where I want your help, and maybe it'll help people watching, listening. Obviously, my son was a different deal altogether. Kids aren't supposed to die before us, and he and I were so close, right? He was my wife called us twin flames. And what I noticed when dealing with that is, at first, I felt like I was completely shattered. Completely, that's the only word I could use. I was telling people that it was like a windshield that had shattered, but all I could relate it to was, because of our relationship, nothing was left unsaid. And I've done an immense amount of work on myself over time to try to be the best version of me. I've been working on me for a long time, that between those two things, the windshield was shattered, but the pieces were still there. You know what I mean? Like, when a windshield gets shattered, it's all, you can't really see through it, but it's still in form. Mm-hmm. And so over time, the cracks started healing and I could see better. But then I went through a phase, literally within a couple weeks, of being shattered to feeling like maybe I feel too good, because I felt like, you know what? His name's Connor. I'm like, Con, I had some amazing things that maybe we'll talk about in another time, that just let me know he's okay, right? And I said, if I live another 75 years from now, in the big scheme of things, that's that fast. It's like you just went to the bathroom, and when you come back, we'll be back together. Like, that's how I was viewing this. And then I went through another phase where I would just cry, even later after, like, I'm thinking, am I feeling too good to cry? So it's this point being, is this big wave that I felt with him that I don't feel with others. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, wait, I'm still experiencing loss of life, but it was the connection that felt different. And so I'm wondering now, while I'm on your couch, so to speak here, is that kind of a normal thing? Or is there, maybe there's no real normal when it comes to this?
Yeah. I mean, you just said so many things. Stir my heart, Jim. You're teaching us right now. So thank you for putting it out there. Couple things came to mind, right? Like, first of all, there's kind of an old shaman idea that someone taught me, and it's building a relationship with death so death becomes an advisor.
Wow.
Right? Like, we are constantly on this fountain of youth chase, right? And it's like death has so much to teach us that we are so afraid of listening with. Right. And so that's the idea that came along when you were saying this. Is like you were well advised because you were in touch with the truth of the loss, the truth of the context. Right. That's the whole radical acceptance. And we always kind of, we're made to try and avoid bad things. And so
it's a nervous system survival thing again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole threat, fight, flight, freeze. Right. It's all about optimizing survival potential. So of course, when something bad happens, we want to lean away. But when it comes to loss and grief, we need to lean into it, and then we have these observations of, am I doing this right? Like, what's going on? How long is this going to last? And you're right? Like, we can all live another 50 years. And according to the history of the universe, it's literally a millisecond. So like, we better get real good with death.
Yes.
And contemplate it, right? Because we want to live a certain way in order to die a certain way.
Yes.
Right? Like, we're not going to have a great death. We're not going to experience that if we're living opposite of that beauty and happiness and contentment, right? And part of that training, part of the learning is holding hands, as I say, with love and loss and death, and listening to the quiet wisdom that comes to us, which is what you're doing, right?
Right, yeah.
So then we get into kind of more of the clinical studies of the stages of grief and how that does loss. And there's two camps. There's one that has 5. There's other that has 7, and you can look them up, right? Just stages of grief. And the important stuff that comes out of that is like, there's no right way. I mean, these stages are very general. They seem to people that go through loss and death and grief, they seem to touch on them in a variety of different ways. But you don't spend a month here, a month here, a month here, right? It's very subjective. What we want to do is witness ourselves. We want to stay close to the love, stay in communication with the dead, so to speak. More importantly, maybe, is stay in communication with the living. Yes. Because we have a tendency to isolate. And the studies are really clear, right? When it comes to loss, because we're mammals. Mammals mean we have a bit, it's all about social networking for us, at a very, not all about, but at a deep level. Yeah. Connection is so important. It helps regulate us.
So community, we want to remain in community during times of loss.
So whether we're dealing with death of a loved one and an unnatural loved one, right? I love what you said. It was very wise. Like, for a child to die is unnatural. Like, we should die before them, right? And so it's a different sort of thing that we have to go through. And it's very, very tender. So, I mean, I so appreciate you putting that out there. But we gotta talk to our loved ones, and that's scary too. Because sometimes, like we talked about earlier, sometimes they're like, I'm so sorry, hang in there, right? And it's like, wow, you didn't hear me at all, right?
And that's the best they got.
And that's okay, right? But it's just, sometimes we don't want to talk. Sometimes we want to talk just through holding someone's hand.
Yes.
And I think last time we talked about the importance of doing the opposite. When we want to isolate, right? We're afraid to talk. We don't have the words. We just want to cry. We can ask our loved one, just be silent and hold my hand.
Yes.
Right. And then we're not alone. And our nervous system knows that. Our mind might not like it, but our nervous system is like, okay, there's contact here. And
let me ask you this on the sense of nervous system. When I have gone through the episodes that I've gone through, and then we as a family, right? my other kids and my amazing wife, we all do it. It seems differently. And one of the things that I noticed as I was going through loss, and I think this would apply to loss of any kind, would be what has really helped me is to maintain a consistency of my rituals. In other words, going through all this, I couldn't just say, okay, now I'm never going to work out again because I'm too sad. Like, it was staying on point with my workouts. It was staying on point with my morning walks, getting in the sunshine. It was staying on point with reading and personal growth and personal development. Like, I had to go to the familiar, but then part of that process made me say, am I trying to avoid actually dealing with the pain? And so I'd like your input on whether it's loss again of a loved one, or loss of a job, or loss of $1 million, or whatever it might be. What's the connection to our rituals versus when those become an escapism from actually setting and holding hands with it?
Yeah, right on. I mean, so you were curious, right? Am I avoiding? And so that, what we want to do is stay curious. We talked about, we got to heal on the go. Life doesn't stop. That could be, an avoidance mechanism at the same time. So it's a balance. We want to stay in ritual, but sometimes it might be useful to be curious about other rituals, right? Like, maybe today, instead of reading, I'm going to draw, or I'm going to, get some watercolors and paint, or there's all these Mandela adult coloring books. So instead of reading and journaling, I'm just going to work on this, right? But we want to stay present. I mean, that's the big thing is we want to stay curious and present and notice our feelings. There have been many times where I've been working out and have started tearing and crying.
Yes, me
right?
too.
It's right. So it's like, can we stay present? If we're staying open and curious, we might be surprised when the emotion comes. And then that's a chance just to be, practice being a good human and just feel what you're feeling.
Right.
Right. I think it's so important. And also at the same time, there seems to be some cultural trajectories where people get caught in feelings. I think people have always gotten caught in feelings, but maybe that might be happening a little more.
What does that look like? How do we know when we're caught in our feelings?
We usually play out a narrative, right? We're usually, kind of living a story that is a little more isolating, or a little more codependent. There's something that is almost soothing us in a way, but it doesn't allow us to really approach what we need to approach. Right? So it's avoidance stuff, right? Like, there are some things that we should avoid. Guns, knives, fangs, fists flying at us, right? There's big things. That's threat.
Yeah.
Right? If it doesn't fall into that category of threat, then it's a stress. Something can feel like a threat. So we work with this with car crash, victims all the time, right? Like, when someone, after a car crash, when someone cuts them off on the interstate, there's a clench, there's a tightness, there's a moment of threat, but then they realize there's no contact. So I train them. It's so disengage, notice that you're afraid and you're still safe. There's no contact. So now this is a stress. It's not, there was a moment of threat, but now it's a stress.
What a great distinction between
huge
threat and stress.
It's a huge distinction. It's so primary, right? So we want to functionalize this. We want to apply this, right? And the nervous system, I tell people, the nervous system isn't so good at telling a real grizzly bear from an existential grizzly bear. It just pops when it's happening, right? The mind can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Nervous system is not so good at it, right? But we have to train that. We have to be my nervous system, there is a grizzly bear present. Now I need to discern real or existential, right? And now I need to maneuver that. I need to stay with it to see what's happening there. Right.
Wow.
I'll have impulses. I want to avoid. No, we don't want to avoid existential grizzly bears. We want to avoid real grizzly bears.
Yeah.
Right. We want to make choices with existential grizzly bears.
Let me ask you this: if we are, if one of our loved ones has faced a real grizzly bear in their life and they have had a loss of any kind, You mentioned earlier that, you talk to your family and they're like, hang in there. It'll get better. Time heals all wounds. Be gracious. Be grateful for the time you had with this thing or this person.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
Ouch, ouch, ouch. Do you have any advice that you could give for how we can be good life partners, good humans, good support system as a non-trained professional for when someone we know is going through loss? What can we do to be good to them and for them?
Yeah. So, I think witnessing, right, is so important.
How do we be a good witness?
So when someone comes to us and lays something heavy down, right, we will ask them, how are you doing? And sometimes we're not even asking that mindfully. We're just asking that out of habit because we're just trying to be nice and whatnot.
Right.
But sometimes people will take the bait and they'll actually say how they're really doing, and they're going to lay something heavy on us. We got to catch it first. We got to be like, okay, like I wasn't expecting that. This is heavy. And so all we need to say to keep it simple is, that sounds intense. It sounds like you're going through it. You're in it. What can I do for you? Right? Or we can say, I'm here to listen. Tell me more. Right? Or we could say, that's so intense. And I'm so glad that you told me. I don't know what to do with that. And I'm here. I'm just here right now with you. Okay? We can say, I want to say something, but it's so surfacey, right? So there's things to say, but we don't have to make it better.
Yeah.
We just want to be with them.
Yes.
Right?
So good.
And it's scary, right? Like, I talk about death all week long. I talk, right? I make people cry for a living. I'm very, very comfortable and used to it, right? And it's hard when people aren't used to that to sit with it. But I think, most people see that it's easier than they realize.
What about this? What about doing? So we've talked about saying, again, this is going from my experience. There was a time during all of this process, whether it's been through, God rest her soul, my mother-in-law, who again I love dearly, or my dad or my son, people would want to bring stuff.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, bring you food, bring you this, bring you this. Yeah. And I, being me, wanted to be alone and process it and watch TV. I just wanted to do my thing, not thinking of my amazing wife, Shauna. And so I'm like, no, I'm good. She's like, fool, you're good.
Yeah.
I ain't good. I don't want to cook. I don't want to do this. But I wasn't thinking. Yeah. And so then I read a book on loss that one of our teammates here had given me after this stuff. And they talk about in the Jewish tradition how they literally do not enjoy stuff for a year. These Orthodox Jewish folks, right? For 7 days or something, I might be getting this a little wrong, but for 7 days, people are expected to come to the house and where these family members are in mourning, straight up mourning. Don't talk to them unless they talk to you, but you do show up and you bring food. And if they want to eat it, they'll eat it. If not. So all of that stuff I'm trying to bring into my reasoning, because now I experience people with loss, and so now I want to do the right thing. Yeah. And one thing, I've learned some better responses, and I just learned more from what you shared with us. Yeah. But what about the doing? What about when they say they don't need anything and you show up with a salad anyway? Yeah. What about that?
I think, I think that's part of love, right? Is giving people an opportunity to serve, right? Most people have they find it easier to serve other people than accept the service from people.
Yes.
Right? It's very, very common. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's part of love, and it's part of like this idea of death as an advisor, that there's so much in these vulnerable moments of life to learn that we don't expect that we're going to learn. And in the clinical culture, it's post-traumatic growth, and there are these, resiliency and these, nice words, but it's just growing as a human being. And so I think part of it is recognizing that people are just really trying. And even when they say the wrong thing, they might have some of their own fears, but they're just trying. Right. And we need to, we want to, for our own practice of being a good human being, we want to see their effort, right? And we can still be quiet with it. And we can always say, you can always say weeks later, months later, a year later, be like, I don't think I ever thanked you for your efforts, right? I I couldn't see it when it was happening. I certainly can see it now, though. Thank you. We could always, I mean, people don't realize, like, I missed an opportunity.
That's brilliant.
It's like, there's no opportunities missed. We can, when it comes to an interpersonal experience, we can always come back to it and say, you know, there's this thing that I missed, but I want you to know that I saw it. Yeah. And I appreciate you with it.
Dude, that's so good.
It's so good.
Let's transition in as we kind of move into a different segment, into the physical stuff loss. Specifically, let's talk about anything related to finances, right? You could have gone through bankruptcy and lost your house. You could have lost your job, but something, forget about the identity part for now, just a straight up financial loss. One of our team members here, he had a loved one who actually got jilted out of their life savings, right? It was a scam and they got scammed. So now there's a shame feeling, but there's this loss of money. When someone loses money in the stock market, in a scam, their house burns down, they don't have insurance, anything, what's the process that they can start digging themselves out of? Because they're going to have to make more money, right? They're going to have to go on and live in a different way than you live without a person in your life that was there. Now you're living in an economic hardship. Do you have any advice for that? What do they do?
It's just brutal. I mean, it's just, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking for a moment what it's like when everything changes in a second, you know, I mean, it's just so hard. It can certainly feel like a death. It can certainly feel like a betrayal. And it's, the advice always feels like it's just fleeting when it's that intense, you know. The idea that came to mind is it's this balance of just the rawness of it, while we gotta make a choice about if we're gonna put the pieces back together, right? And that's so much of trauma recovery and these life-changing events. It's like we still have to keep hustling while we mourn.
Yeah, healing on the go is one of the coolest statements I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's so
healing on the go.
Yeah, right on. What I think you know, in a situation like any advice just feels generic, right? But it's like we got to start somewhere. So that's where my heart's coming from right now.
Okay.
So,
yep.
You know, when a loss like that happens, can we stay a little closer to loved ones, right? Because the money might go, the job might go, but that hand is still there to be held. So can we just stay close to loved ones?
Yeah.
You know, when there's kids involved and parents are scared, like, games don't cost anything. Like, there's still plans that got to be made. Do we have to sell the house? Do we pull a home equity loan? There's all this stuff, but like, games are free. You know, reading a book, you know, out loud to each other or to our kids, playing ball, right? There's stuff around that we can do that we, even in the life-changing event, we don't want to look back 10 years and be like, dude, I was so stressed out that I didn't go fishing with my kid. I didn't play tag. I didn't play hide and seek. We don't want that regret.
Right.
So we want, it's like when we approach problems, we want to approach problems where the solutions that we provide to the problems are true solutions, not just solutions that cause more problems. I call that a quasi-solution, right? Like, it works for the moment, but it only causes more problems later.
Got it.
You know, and so, again, staying present with the loss, like, okay, this is the hustle. This is what we got to do. You know, I got to work out my feelings with this. We also got to put the pieces together financially, and this hand isn't going to be here forever.
Yeah.
So I better hold it.
Do you like the thought of, in relation to that, do you like the thought of saying, I've done this before? And maybe it depends on where you've been. Like, if I lost everything at my age, at my time right now, I'd be like, I've done this before. Like, I can rebuild financially. There are certain things I might not be able to rebuild.
That's wisdom. Like, that's where wisdom comes from hard experience, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, I do like that idea if it's attainable.
Yes.
Right.
Right. What about this? What about this? Just one more topic, because I know I've been keeping you. I know you got all kinds of patients coming up today.
We're rolling. Let's do it.
Circling back to the trauma, the loss of trauma from things like we see every day, from car accidents and these kind of things, physical loss. They lost their ability to use their back temporarily, right? They've lost their ability to be able to do the things that they really want to do. When they're looking at that, is visualization of regaining their full function back to health, is that a balancing? Because we've talked about get to see somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Get to see a professional. Mm-hmm. We've talked about stay close to the ones you love, lean into the loss, Good. Understand is it a threat versus a stress. Good. Now, what about our minds and rebuilding, literally seeing our body back where it was post-trauma, something like that?
Yeah. I think there's value to it if it's meaningful to them, right? So
individual then.
Yeah. So William James said, it's if it's meaningful if basically it's useful.
Got
right?
it.
It's useful if it's meaningful. So yeah, I think that can also help. I love the question, is this the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life?
Ooh, yeah.
Sometimes it is. But certainly there's kind of these mind biases, and recency bias is a very real deal. And so, if we have a recent injury, we're going to be paying and weight that heavier than a past injury, even though the past injury might be worse. So our long-term memory sometimes isn't all that great. And so we definitely want to tap into that. And it's like, okay, how many other times, in what ways have I been hurt in the past? And did I heal? Right? Most of the time, the answer is yes, I moved on, right? Bones heal, tendons heal. I don't think time heals all wounds, but it does work on the physical body like that.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies are wired to heal. So can I picture that healing process, right? People can use, there's different visualizations of, what is the color? Ask your body, not your brain, what's the color that goes with healing? Green. And so can I just picture green around my spine? And that may bring comfort to someone if we can really focus on it, right? Acceptance works. So when we bring our attention to pain, it seems like the subjective experience of pain drops. And there's some clinical studies out there that show that.
Man, that is good.
Pretty wild stuff. And also the truth, right? I worked with 4 spine injury patients this week, hit from behind and their spine's blown out. These are hard-working, good people, manual labor, right? They just want to work. They like working. It's like they can't. So it's that loss of identity a little bit, injury, loss of finances. What do I do now? And there's no easy way through that. I think that brings us to the topic of try to suffer well. I can still engage in something. I got to engage in that.
Yes.
So motion is lotion with these injuries. We got to keep the body moving, right? And so but when I walk for 20 minutes, it hurts. If I walk for 10 minutes, I'm good. Cool. Go on 3 10-minute walks today. We want to give the spine a chance to heal, but we also got to keep it moving. Visualization helps, right?
Yeah.
Our history helps. We're stronger. I think we've talked about this. We're stronger than we think we are, right? For
More
us
resilient.
to be sitting in this room together right now in this moment, our ancestors had to go through things that would rock our worlds. Famine, hand-to-hand combat, all sorts of death. For the last 10,000 years, our ancestors had to go through brutal, life experiences. If they can do it, we can do it.
We're going to overcome loss, my friend.
It's and it's part of the human condition.
Right.
That's what it is to be human, is we have to experience that loss. We get to learn how to work with it. And also, listen, this is a lot of addictions are formed around loss. There's a lot of people that just don't know how to do it, and they're doing their best, but they try a solution that just causes more problems.
That's what you call the pseudo or quasi-solution.
Quasi-solution, yeah.
Well, this has been so insightful, and this has been one of my favorite episodes to do because I got to receive help while, from my loss, while hopefully giving so many people a chance to learn about loss, because we all go through it. Like you said, none of us is immune.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you've taken time to share this with us, it just, again, if you've not seen Dr. Ron's stuff before, go look in our podcast. This is number 3. The other ones were really, really great as well. But man, Dr. Ron, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it so much.
Oh, it's always an honor. And Jim, thanks so much for sharing with everyone about, your personal experiences.
Not easy, but worth it.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Ron, this has been such a fabulous show, and you've given so much information, like we said before. But the one thing that I want to make sure that people know is how they can reach you. You're a resource. You're a trusted advisor. You're my trusted advisor. How is it that people can reach you if they want to ask questions, learn more about what you do, maybe even follow in your footsteps professionally?
Yeah. You could reach me through the Mind Spa website. It's mindspadenver.com. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I also work with Synergy Health Partners. You can get in touch with me through there. But the Mind Spa website, I think I do actually have an old website. I'm so non-tech savvy. It's ronschwenkler.com. But there's some information through there. So those are the ways to stay in touch with me.
Dr. Ron will be joining us in future episodes on more mental health issues. If you have one issue that you'd like us to talk about or like to hear from Dr. Ron, please email me, jim@ramoslaw.com. Send me what that is, and then I'll put it to the expert. We'll talk about it, and we'll go through it. And while I'm asking for things, I'm going to ask you, please subscribe, follow us, do all the things that you guys do on social media. That would be great. And there's going to be some show notes with some links to show notes are going to be on here. And finally, one more thing I don't want to forget. Would you leave us a 5-star review if you thought this was worth it? I would greatly appreciate it. So now that I'm done asking for stuff, now I'm going to make you do something. Well, at least I hope you do it. And that is get out there and make a difference. Dr. Ron, thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.